Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 277 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is Summer Rain.
My name is Patrick Knisley.
My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest joining us for the 9th time on the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, the wonderful Emma Brockway.
Hey guys, I'm back.
Yes. It'll only be another year before the next Zelda game comes out for you to enter the double-digit club for the podcast.
Well, I mean, one of my speculation episodes, I was asking for 1 million, so eventually it'll happen.
Maybe so.
Eventually it'll happen. Emma, we're so glad to have you back on the show. Emma is here to talk about the new Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, aka What If Zelda Was a Girl? It came out last week. We're all ready to talk about it. But before we get into that, we're going to break down some of the news from this past week, like the embargo that lifted of images from the Nintendo Museum. Tokyo Game Show also happened. There's some new laws in California that might actually affect gamers. But before all of that, how's everybody been this past week?
I had an insane whirlwind of a weekend, starting with Thursday night. We did some family stuff. Friday night, my mother-in-law came, and then I took my kid to this gaming truck birthday party, which was kind of interesting, I guess, for podcast listeners. They rent this giant truck that comes out and parks in front of their house, and it's got like 4 VR headsets inside, a racing rig inside the truck, and then 4 consoles on the side of the truck. And so that happened. And then just lots of other family get-togethers. And I did an urban forestry training this weekend as well. One of my interests is plants and climate stuff. And the city of Pflugerville offers this urban forestry training. And then you can volunteer and help the urban forester like plant trees and identify trees and that kind of thing. So
that's awesome.
I got a day really full of tree knowledge.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
And then every little moment where I have time, I'm squeezing in work on Monochrome Heights because Steam Next Fest is coming in 2 weeks. And I am going to be working more at the plant nursery. So I got to finish this damn game while I still have time. Mm-hmm. So that was me. That's what I've been doing.
Very cool. Yeah, I had a pretty good weekend. I did a good amount of chilling. I saw I think 3 movies this weekend. I went to the cinema quite a bit. I went and saw Speed Racer 2008, directed by the Wachowskis, at Hyperreal Film Club. I really recommend that place if you are in Austin. It used to be like kind of a roaming thing, and now they have a physical space, which is really great. I actually saw 2 movies there. I saw another one called Fantasy A Gets a Mattress about an autistic rapper. That was fun. And then I also saw Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis the other day. We might have to record an episode of Super Film Heads just to break down what it is that I saw in that movie because, oh boy, gang, what a disaster. I really recommend checking it out. Everybody go see it. It's flopping incredibly hard. Go support Auteur Cinema, even if it is one of the most insane things you've ever seen. But yeah, other than that, just kind of I'm wrapping up a lot of work. I've got a little bit of like travel anxiety about some trips that are coming up, but working through that. And other than that, I think we're all good. You caught me on a good day. How are you doing, Summer?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I've also been pretty busy. I recently did host a PowerPoint party at my house. Some fellow Switch Heads came out for that. I specifically do want to shout out Weast in our Discord because she did a PowerPoint where we all voted on who she should marry and have kittens with in the game Cattails. And now we all want to play Cattails. And it was a really heated and really productive discussion in my living room of all of my closest friends over who we should marry. So we really loved that. And I did a PowerPoint where I gave basically a fake Nintendo Direct where I like imitated all of the transitions and everything in the in Nintendo Directs, but I did it of everybody that was at the party and explained what Nintendo franchise everybody was.
Well, at least we got one Direct in September.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And I also just came back from the Bay Area in California because I went to Mag West. It's like Super Mag Fest, but it is on the West Coast. It was my first time going to the West Coast. I was kind of, to be honest, scared of going to California because I feel like it's a whole other planet over there. And it was fine. No, I had a really good time. I got to perform with like a 50-piece group, the Virtual Video Game Orchestra. Got to do some singing with them and got to see Lotus Juice again perform live. If you don't know who that is, he does all of the rapping for the Persona games. So that was really, really cool to see. Getting to hear an entire room of sweaty weebs sing out Mass Destruction together is just so fulfilling. Yeah, that's me. Emma, what about you? How have you been?
I'm doing good. Overall, pretty much also just chilling out. I had some friends from high school in town this weekend, so that was nice. And then I also went ice skating for the first time. So
cool.
I did not fall, and I feel accomplished.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tell the truth.
That's better than I've ever done.
Tell the truth. You
skating.
went ice skating for the first time because we just got that new ice skating banner in Fire Emblem Heroes, right?
Ooh, it's not, but I wish I could say that was the reason.
It's such
One
a
of my
random new banner to get and not during winter.
It's summer. They could have done an ice-themed thing.
I know.
Yeah, no, one of my friends has been taking lessons, so she was like, y'all have to come on a free skate day on the weekend. So,
All right.
Very cool.
Nice
Nice to
skating.
support. Well, last week we did an episode on 3D platformers. We got a lot of comments. So here's a few select ones and shout outs. Over on YouTube, Ripper UK, not about the 3D platformers, but about UFO 50, said, "It's so good, guys. 10 of 10, top tier." David?
Yeah, it's one of the best games I've ever played. Yeah, truly.
Back on the 3D platformers tip here. Hatstack Mike said they absolutely love Penny's Big Breakaway, the colors and the soundtrack and the gameplay and the flow of it. Eric Shaw had a nice comment about how Astrobot's going to always have a special place in his heart because he has 4-year-old twins, and this is sort of the game that has gotten them into gaming, and that they're always asking to play it and stuff like that. And that really warms my heart. That's the game that your kid like finally clicks with. That's a fun moment. Yeah. And then I'm going to do my best here. Michu Michui, I think is what it is, made a list of all the 3D platformers we listed on the episode. So if I said your name wrong, I'm sorry. Thanks for the list.
I'm sure you said it exactly perfectly.
Yeah, that's how you say it. We had a lot of good discussion on our Discord as well. A couple comments from over there. AV said, "This episode was absolute catnip to me." Swampy Southpaw said, "If I hadn't literally gotten Astrobot yesterday, this episode would push me over the edge." And then unrelated to 3D platformers, Cool Uncle Vince did this really red string on the wall conspiracy theory thing about pattern recognition in our episodes, which points to a new Donkey Kong Country game coming out next year, I think. You have to join the Discord and read it to see it. If you two want to be shouted out, then make a comment on the YouTube or on one of our social media posts, or come join the Discord and be part of us talking about the episodes over there. We always appreciate it if you review the podcast over on Apple or some other place, or share it online. We have a Patreon if you would like to financially support the podcast and become a patron. And then if you're just listening to the audio version but you want to see our faces, hey, we have a YouTube channel where you can see the video version, and you can hit like and subscribe while you're there, and that would really help us out. And with that, we're going to move on to the news and rumors for the week. So there were several events we talked about last week that were happening, and now we're going to talk about them that actually happened. Tokyo Game Show was the first one that we're going to talk about. I'll be honest, I did not pay a lot of attention to Tokyo Game Show, but I know there were actually a fair amount of announcements, right? This was a pretty big show. A lot of things happened. Are there any games or things that happened during Tokyo Game Show that y'all want to talk about, or that y'all know about?
I didn't pay super close attention. I was just kind of seeing random bits as things were happening. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me was Hideo Kojima showed off a good bit of Death Stranding 2, and everybody really wanted to see like gameplay or what was happening. Instead, I think it was like several unrelated character cutscenes and like a photo mode that showed off like some of like the women that he's been 3D body scanning, doing different poses in very realistic looking lighting and and effects and all that kind of stuff. So Kojima's gonna Kojima, but yeah, that was the main takeaway I took from it.
I didn't get a chance to watch it, but I know that the game that I am excited about that came out of it is Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, getting a Majima-focused game, and he is a pirate. Hello? And now people are complaining about this franchise being too silly? Absolutely not. It couldn't be more serious than this, because I am back on my Yakuza kick. Pirates.
Pirates. We have a note here, which I didn't realize, that Tears of the Kingdom won the Best Game Award.
Yeah, they do a kind of yearly Game of the Year award at Tokyo Game Show, and Tears of the Kingdom won. I think Aonuma and a couple of the other directors, I always forget the director's name in that game, sadly. But yeah, they were both there to accept the award, so that was really nice.
Sort of tying into this, I don't know that this happened at the event, but there was an interview with a Japanese publication called NetLab with an individual from Capcom where they talked about the Ace Attorney games, and everyone's excited because they said they definitely have a lot of directions they want to further grow in, and they aren't going to stop producing content for this series, which means, and then they said there's no new announcements after that. So the wait for announcements. But it's got Ace Attorney fans excited, and so we thought we'd mention that.
Yeah, they did mention mixed media is what they're also thinking about as well. So I think that could include like a television show, which I think would be awesome, right? Like I think a Ace Attorney anime would be super, super cool. Or even like a live action movie, like live action adaptations have been getting a lot of traction recently. There's a Yakuza live action coming out very soon.
There was an Ace Attorney live action. It did not do well.
Oh, really?
Okay, maybe not. Well, maybe don't do that then. But anyway, this is exciting. I know Jay somewhere is jumping up and down, excited for this.
And then there was the Sonic Central event. And I guess one of the big things out of that, one of the few things out of that, is the Sonic Rumble game, which kind of just looks like Fall Guys with Sonic characters, which I guess is the way I'm going to describe it. I don't know. Could be fun if they had, I don't know, but coming out to PC and mobile this winter, so not too far from now. I think the idea of like Speed and Sonic and Fall Guys could be cool, but I don't know that this is going to quite nail it. We'll see.
They should have just put Sonic in Fall Guys.
I think they have, certainly.
Have they?
There was. I remember because they're like the bean guys and they wear like a costume.
You
know, I definitely remember seeing a Sonic Fall Guys costume. But
okay.
Anyway, I don't know. It's cool. Sega, there are so many Sonic mobile games straight up. The one announcement I was really hoping for here was that Sonic Dream Team would be coming to Switch or consoles in general. That was an Apple Arcade exclusive for a long time. I don't know that it still is. Maybe it still is, but either way, I guess they're still waiting on that exclusivity to go up before that game comes out. But that game is actually really awesome, and I'd love to see that come to Switch eventually.
And then the other gaming sort of showcase that happened this past week was Sony's State of Play. And there were a few announcements there, including, I guess, one of the biggest ones is the Ghost of Tsushima sequel, Ghost of Yotai. Is that how you say it?
Yotai.
Mm-hmm. Which, shout out to Swampy Southpaw, who, like, before that event was like Ghost of Tsushima sequel on our Discord, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Good call there. There were a number of other games showing off. It looks like some of these aren't exclusive to PlayStation. I don't know a whole lot about these. David?
I think a lot of the most... Ghost of Yotai looks amazing. That is pretty unequivocal. I have not played the original Ghost of Tsushima. That has always passed me by, but I would like to play this. And no, the game is not woke just because you play as a woman. Sorry. Twitter has been really annoying me recently. But no, I think a lot of the games that are coming out that looked the best in the State of Play are also coming to the Switch. And I thought some of those are worth talking about. The Lunar collection. If, eagle-eyed viewers will see that I've had Lunar Silver Story complete in the background of pretty much every episode of this podcast. It was I think a Saturn game originally and then came out for the PlayStation. It also had a sequel, and both of the games are getting kind of the HD treatment. They're getting a full widescreen remaster. The anime cutscenes are getting up-res and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very excited for that. That is coming to the Switch. So JRPG fans should definitely look forward to that. Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, is getting a remaster as well. That's coming to all platforms, but they just kind of showed it at the State of Play because Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver was very much like a PlayStation game back in the day. And it was like kind of that and Lara Croft were both kind of like the big PS1 games that were similar kind of in genre. And then Fantasian as well, which we know has been coming to Switch, got an actual release date. It's in December, I believe. So fans of Nintendo also got some goodies out of the PlayStation Sony State of Play as well.
And then briefly want to mention that Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered was announced as part of this State of Play. And this has been a little bit controversial because Sony has this system where if you have a PS4 version of a game, you can pay $10 to get the upgrade on. So this one, if you had the game for PS4, you could just pay $10 to get this new remastered version. Well, the Horizon Zero Dawn, like whatever edition that they had out physically and digitally, was $20. And now Sony has upped that price to be $40. So if you try to buy the PS4 version of Horizon Zero Dawn, now it is more expensive than it was. I don't know if I feel like that's such a shady thing. I kind of get why they do it, right? Because it's kind of a loophole people might try to take. But I also understand that is kind of, I don't know. Does anybody have any strong feelings about that? Or
I think it's shitty. I don't think you should raise. I don't think you should raise the price of a digital game that's been out for like 10 years or whatever. Not 10 years, but since 2017, right? The original Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah.
Like, come on, man. That's fucking ridiculous. I mean, look, I know I'm saying this as a Nintendo fan, and Nintendo never drops the price of any of their games,
Anymore,
but
they
it's,
used to. Yeah.
Yeah. But I just don't think, I think that the price of digital goods should go down over time and not up,
Mm-hmm.
A physical
I agree with
good.
that.
Yeah, I think a physical good going up in price due to scarcity or demand, that makes sense. A digital good, come on. I mean, I get that, they're trying to sell this thing at like full price. Really, the bigger thing is this game did not need a fucking remaster. I'm tired of PlayStation remastering games that are like
Remaking
5 to 7 years old. It's like, dude, come on. Like, straight up. The game still looks amazing if you play it on a PS5 especially. So
I have mixed feelings because like I do like that they're offering, I don't know, if a game I loved from 10 years ago, like got an upgrade and I could just pay $10 to get the upgraded version of it. Like I would maybe be into that if I was like a hardcore fan of the game. I think where I get stuck is I don't really hear people talk about this game. And I don't know if it's just because like I don't own a PlayStation. And so I'm like stuck in this space of like most of the opinions I ever hear about this franchise are just like shitty gamers, and I don't actually know like how good the game is itself. But yes, raising the price of the original base game is if Breath of the Wild got a remastered version that we could pay $10 extra for, but then they raised the base price to $70, how would we feel about that?
I don't know. It's hard to make that one-to-one because like they would have to double the price to 120 for it to really be a one-to-one, or they would have had to have dropped the price in the first place, which again, Nintendo doesn't do. So I think in that case, it would just be the same. You know what I mean? I don't know. Whatever.
I was trying to give an example that like maybe we would like feel something about, but
I don't know. It's hard to say.
I do think this is an interesting thing to talk about, though, because like you were saying, it would be good to reduce the price of digital goods that are old. And that's what they were doing by offering like a reduced price. And then you can upgrade the games you already have for a reduced price. The biggest problem is this loophole that you could go buy the cheap version and not pay just for the thing they're putting out.
Yeah, I don't know. Just take the L, Sony. Like, just take the L. Like, it's a good deal. And people take advantage of it. It just buys you some goodwill with the fucking customers, and that shit is fucking priceless, man. It's like, why eke the extra $20 out of the people that are already spending $700 on a fucking PS5 Pro to begin with? You know what I mean?
Also, this is digital. You have records. Just put a cap and say, if you bought the game before this time, you get the discount.
Yeah.
It would be really easy.
Well, we'll move on to a sort of semi-related topic of this, which is that California has passed a new law that I think will take effect next year that is going to require warnings related to digital sales, essentially forcing sellers to kind of say what they're selling, that it's more like a license than like ownership, especially for like, I think, or maybe exclusively for stuff that is always online that you theoretically could go away someday. And I think it is motivated by the whole discovery shows on PlayStation that kind of just people had bought and that just kind of disappeared, or at least in part. I'm sure it's motivated by more than that, but that's one thing that's been cited. I don't know if I explained that very well, but any thoughts on this in terms of having to explicitly state this? Does it feel like a step in the right direction, or kind of or stupid, or?
No, I don't think it's stupid. In fact, I think it's pretty based. I think this is a pretty good thing to do. Way to go, Gavin Newsom. More than just a pretty face. No, I think that honestly, I mean, this is like a law that like European Union would pass, right? This is like usually lawmakers are not on the level where they need to be with digital ownership laws, you know? So I think this is a good thing. Really, if anything, this kind of reflects more of the sad state of digital ownership in general, right? Like there has been a lot of discussion online recently about how, not only can anyone pull anything from any digital storefront at any time, they can also pull it from your library, and they're completely within their rights to do so, because you don't own games. Whenever you purchase a game, you're purchasing an entitlement in order to play the game. You're purchasing basically a license in order to play the game as long as they deem fit, right? And that has, for the most part, for the past like 10 years, not really been abused. It's only been more and more recently where, things have been taken away due to tax credit reasons, or people are finding, like you said, Patrick, loopholes in order to kind of subvert the system. People are kind of finally realizing like, oh, we can pinch a penny here and fuck the consumer, right? So it's not like this is a consumer protection more than it is a consumer awareness situation, right? So I feel like this could go two ways, right? This could go the direction of people get really mad because they're buying entitlements instead of actual games. And so that means that game publishers pivot to, more DRM-free methods, something like Good Old Games or GOG, which you own those games when you buy a game through there, right? That's not an entitlement. But I think probably I can also see this going the other way, which is people being like, oh, great, cool. We cleared the room. It's entitlements. We're going to take way more from you whenever we want now, right? So there's two different ways to look at it. Either way, it's definitely starting a conversation kind of nationally here about like what the future of game ownership in a digital age is going to look like. I don't know. It's strange and weird, and is just another reason why it's great that things like the Internet Archive exist, and I hope never go away.
Yeah. I would go out as far as to say that consumer awareness does lend itself to consumer protection, right? Because like that's how we protect ourselves as consumers, is like having more clear language. And I think that this is a step in the direction. And yes, like you said, it's opening that conversation. By California passing that means that language is going to have to be clear for probably the entire United States to just cover their butts. So now everyone's going to have to see that, right? Physical products. California and Illinois have certain laws about certain products that have to have certain warnings on them. And then it says that for regardless of where it is, like, just because you live in Texas doesn't mean that those warnings don't exist for you. Just because
those
you're
Californians
in Texas,
are still screwing us over,
right? Like just because you're not consuming the product in California doesn't mean you're safe from it in Texas. It just means that thanks to California, you are also seeing that warning. So I like this is cool for that reason, that the entire United States, we're going to have that same language, and yes, maybe that will shift how some things function. I mean, or it doesn't, and at least it just leads, like you said, bigger conversations and about the AAA industry as a whole.
I think one thing that this could also lead to is something that we talked about recently with the EU, which is just this kind of forcing the hand of these developers and publishers to create offline modes for their games as well.
Yeah.
For a workaround kind of around this to kind of get some better will with people, right? And so I think if we start to push things into that direction, I think that's great. That is a law that's kind of on the books in the European Union, but hasn't like fully gone to a vote. But just the idea that people are rumbling about it was enough for people here in the States even to start picking up on it as well. And I think a lot of developers have started doing that, Nintendo included, like we talked about with Pocket Camp getting an offline mode pretty soon. So hopefully that kind of helps, and just kind of the threat of laws being passed on this sort of stuff is enough to scare publishers into, doing some things that are a little bit more consumer friendly.
Well, moving along then to some news that Arika, the developer of a number of NSO games, the Tetris 99, the Super Mario 35 and F-Zero 99?
No, F-Zero 99 is that's NST.
US. Yeah.
Yeah. They did Pac-Man 99. Arika also did Endless Ocean, Luminous as well.
And Arika, the news is that Arika is developing a new entry in the Tetris the Grand Master series, which I think they were also involved in at least some, if not most or all of those games in the past.
They made those games as well.
And that's going to come out next year sometime. David, are you excited about this? Are you a Tetris the Grand Master person? I don't really. Can you explain what that is too? Just someone like me that doesn't know what the difference between a regular Tetris and a Tetris the Grand Master game.
Yeah, Tetris the Grand Master is like the arcade. It's like an arcade version of Tetris. That's just like a really hardcore version of Tetris. Like it's very, very difficult. I think there are multiple ports of Tetris the Grand Master on Switch. I think Tetris the Grand Master 1, 2, and 3 are all on Switch at this point. Or maybe it's just 1 and 2, but all worth playing if you're a Tetris fan. They're insanely difficult, but they're very fun to get good at. And it seems like this game that Arika is making, and God bless Arika, one of my favorite fucking developers. It's like Arika and Jupiter, like two of my favorite unsung developers of the Nintendo canon, are trying to kind of ease people in a little bit more. They had a very funny thing. It was like Tetris that makes you good at Tetris or something. They made it. They basically worded it in a very strange way that seemed like a bit of an auto translate bug. But essentially, what I think they're trying to do is be like, hey, everybody wants to play Tetris the Grandmaster, but it's way too fucking hard. This is going to kind of ease you into it. And so I think that's an excellent idea. I could use that personally because the games are incredibly difficult and I'm really good at Tetris. So I think that this should be really fun. And man, Tetris fans are eating good. We got a Tetris game coming out later this year, which is a celebration of the franchise. We got a new Arika Tetris Grandmaster made specifically for consoles. So I'm very excited as a Tetris fan right now.
Very nice. Well, next up is the news that a company called Retro Remake is making basically DIY kits for you to replace your Switch Lite screen and upgrade them to OLED, as well as some other interesting things. But the sort of starter price for this is $50, so you can, get the tools and equipment you need to pop out the old screen and put in this new screen. There's sort of different tiers. That bottom one, it sounds like it doesn't have touch ability, which is kind of not necessary for you if you're depending on what you like to play and that sort of thing. But then like the highest tier, in addition to having touch ability and touch screen ability and all that, also allows you to make your Switch Lite dock basically, which is pretty cool. I'll be honest, like reading about this for the news, I was like, man, putting an OLED screen on my Switch Lite and converting it so that it could plug in sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. I was like, Lord, stop me from getting that new Zelda Switch Lite that's out, which is like a gold Switch Lite, and then modding this with an OLED screen and an HDMI out capability. Like if I had that, I probably wouldn't ever play my regular Switch ever again.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I love my OLED. Don't get me wrong. And I like how big the screen is. And I think it's such a beautiful screen. But like having an OLED screen in that smaller form factor with the D-pad and just like the single body, I don't know. It'd be a lot more portable. It seems like they would be the best of all worlds. Obviously, I've watched a video of Taki Udon, who I think we have a video of here showing off some of the stuff here. It's an earlier version of the video, but he showed a video of him like assembling the whole thing. And it's not an easy assembly. You don't need to solder anything, and you don't need to do there's like really destructive stuff that you can do to switches in order to do swaps of things. This isn't like that, but it does look really complicated, and there's a lot to do here. But I just got to stop myself from, it's like if this had come like 2 years ago, I think I would have done this. I think it would have been a really fun project to do. But when we're kind of barking at the door of the Switch 2 or the Super Switch, whatever we want to call it, I don't know that now is the time to get a Switch Lite, even though I really want to. I just know that once the new Switch comes out, I'm going to be wanting to play everything on that instead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to move along to some Nintendo Museum news. So like Summer said at the beginning of the show, the embargo for the Nintendo Museum is up. And basically, I guess there's been, I don't know that it's open to the public yet. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's been a lot of people invited to go and they've been able to share videos and pictures. And so we've gotten a much clearer look at what the Nintendo Museum has in it and what it is with the kind of experiences and that sort of thing. It's been pretty cool to look through some of these photos and videos and see people playing. I don't know. I'm really into the like big controller stuff.
The I want the pillows. I want the big pillow controllers. I need
there's a
Wiimote
big pillow, right?
Yes, and N64 and SNES. Those are the ones that I saw photos of for sure. Anyway.
There's like a big Wii controller with that's like a body pillow, basically. There's I mean, we're just talking about the merch here. I mean, that's like the main stuff that I've seen. And Lord help me again, for God's sake. This is why I'm not buying the Switch Lite mod kit, is because I'm going to be spending all my fucking money at this Nintendo Museum merch store
and then shipping it back or like carrying it, squeezing it.
Yeah, I want to buy a giant controller pillow for all my friends, but how am I possibly going to bring that on the plane? No, I actually haven't really watched too many of these videos because I am going in November and I kind of don't want it spoiled, but I don't know. Maybe I'll see it just so I know like what to check out, because I'm not going to have like as much time as I'll want to have there. But this place looks really, really, really cool. I know Shigeru Miyamoto was interviewed and we've got a couple things that he said coming up here in the show. But one of the things he talked about with this Nintendo Museum is that he really wanted to make this museum for Nintendo employees. He's like, basically, all these people that are working at Nintendo now were not around for so much of this shit. You know, it's a lot of new blood. It's a lot of like new heads. And this museum is a way for like them to understand where we came from so that they can like kind of carry a lot of what we put into the company back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s forward in time once he's gone, right? And so, you know, he was like, that's why we're not making a Nintendo museum like in America. Like this is in Kyoto and not Tokyo because Nintendo headquarters is in Kyoto and everybody works here in Kyoto, right? So I think that was interesting to see. I can't wait to go. I'm very, very, very excited. This is going to definitely be a highlight of my trip for me when I go to Japan. But I will try to get as much merch for you, Summer, as I possibly can.
No, I'll buy you a plane ticket actually, specifically for all of the pillows that
That's great.
I need to bring back.
Sounds good.
What is this note? I did not see this about a Virtual Boy being emulated.
Yeah, something else that Miyamoto was talking about. They do have Virtual Boy games that you can play there. A lot of the games are playable when you go through the exhibit. And apparently the Virtual Boy games are being emulated on Switch hardware. Miyamoto just said that. So I don't know if that means that Virtual Boy games are coming to Nintendo Switch Online. It's clearly possible. I mean, obviously it would be possible. You can emulate lots of stuff if you hack your Switch, right? But it's just interesting that he said that, and maybe that's a little tease, but it'd be great to finally see Virtual Boy get some representation in a playable state, right? For a long time, Nintendo kind of like to pretend that the Virtual Boy didn't exist.
The last bit of news here is kind of like David mentioned. Miyamoto did an interview with the New York Times. And I think, speaking of the museum, was it here? Didn't he say something as well about like one of the reasons the museum is for the employees, but also one of the reasons is so he doesn't have to say the same things in interviews or something like that? I feel like I heard or read that somewhere, and I think it came out of this, but I could be wrong. So sorry if that's not true, but I was seeing that today. Anyway, the other big thing that people have been mentioning is comments about AI. He was asked about that, and it sounds like he said, essentially, I think the quote is, Nintendo would rather go in a different direction, is the quote that's kind of being talked about, which is good to hear, right?
Yeah. Good Lord.
This generative AI, I think, in particular, I assume that we're talking about here, because obviously that term gets, confusing, but
yeah. And I think Shuntaro Furukawa said similar stuff earlier this year, just about how, it can be used in creative ways, but also it raises issues with intellectual property rights, right? And if there's anybody who is very stringent about intellectual property rights, it's Nintendo, right? So I think, they don't want to get caught up in anything either, obviously, not like, they could probably fight stuff if they were using it. But I think they're basically like, we don't know what the future holds with this technology. Right now, as it stands, you can't trademark anything that uses generative AI, or at least, you can't like put a copyright on like a book that you write with ChatGPT or something like that, or like art that you make through Midjourney, So I think they're just like, no, why would we do that? We just like hire good, creative, talented people and we use them. Like, worked for us in the past. Why would we change now? Right. So I really think that's a great step and a great kind of strong message from someone who is very respected in this medium. It's kind of the polar opposite of what you constantly see at a Square Enix, where they're just chasing the newest like fucking tech bro fad, So I'm really happy to see them be like, no, we're not going to do that, or we'd rather do something different, not just follow everybody else in whatever direction they're doing.
It seems like that's the root of the comment, honestly, was him just saying, everyone kind of starts doing the same thing. Take AI, for example. Everyone's doing it the same way, and we don't want to necessarily fall into that hole. We're Nintendo. We have our own way of doing it. We'll do whatever we want to do.
Yeah, you're right. He did. I think he said similar stuff too about like, we don't need like the strongest consoles, Like it seems like with this new system coming out that if the specs are to be believed, there's still going to be like pretty much a generation behind everybody else. And I think Nintendo is completely comfortable being in that position. And it seems like they probably always will be, especially if they kind of release mid-gen with everybody else, right?
But yeah, that's kind of their thing. They have this niche and they're not trying to line up and do what everyone else is doing because they're not going to win that way. They win by being special in Nintendo and a few steps behind, but off in their own special Nintendo world where they can make a whole museum out of the content.
He's like, we're going back to playing cards, baby.
I'll buy them.
Me too.
You say that, yeah, but I would buy amiibo cards or like the AR cards that we had for the 3DS. Like, please do something like that again, actually.
Well, all right. I think that then is going to wrap up our news segment. And we are going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. We are back, and this week we are talking about The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, the newest Zelda game where you can play as Zelda.
The girl, by the way.
Right.
The girl Zelda.
The girl Zelda. Finally.
Yeah.
Can't believe they made her a girl.
Because
this
of woke.
game came out last week, and as we do with these sort of new release episodes, we've all had a chance to dip our toes into it to varying degrees, I'm sure, and we're going to give our impressions and thoughts so far. We like to open it up with sort of a big picture, sort of how we're enjoying the game. And Emma, since you're our guest, maybe you can just lead us off. How are you feeling about the game overall? Are you enjoying yourself?
Yeah.
How far along are you? That sort of thing?
I am loving this game, and I'm probably 4/5 of the way done.
Whoa!
I played a lot of it this weekend, and I couldn't put it down. From the moment of starting, it was just like nostalgia, but new at the same time. And it's just such a good mix of what I would want out of a handheld 2D Zelda.
Wow, I said dip our toes, but
Yeah.
you took you dove right in. Yeah.
I've been waiting to talk about this.
Just the tippy top of your head is out of the water. I definitely did not play as much as I wanted to this weekend. I had a very weird weekend. It was kind of hard for me to like focus on Echoes of Wisdom. Every time I would like pick it up and play it, I would play for like 5 or 10 minutes and then kind of put it down. I think also my brain is a little scrambled by the really fast pace of like UFO 50, which is a game that I've been playing, which is just like 50 games you just pick up and you're playing immediately. And it's just like lots of like, constant, just like, oh, you're doing things, So like actually playing a game where you're slowing down and a lot of people are talking and you're kind of talking to many people that are saying, go talk to this person. I ended up kind of not playing as much as I wanted to. That said, last night, I actually like picked it up in earnest and finally feel like it clicked, right? Because it took me a while. And I think that for the most part, like the kind of fundamental mechanic of this game being the echoes is not very intuitive. You know what I mean? And I'm sure we'll get more into that in a little bit. But it is not, like when you play a platforming game, it's like there's generally a run button. And then if you press jump when you're in the air again, you do a double jump. There's things that are like kind of coded in like the lexicon of like gaming controls. And this game kind of bucks all of them in a big way, especially when you're playing a familiar format like a top-down Zelda, right? So I think for a while, me just not immediately clicking with the controls just frustrated me and kind of pushed me away a little bit. But I think it's just something that's going to take time, and I'm sure the more I play, the more I'll like it. And I'm already starting to get to that point where I'm like, oh, okay, it's starting to become a second nature to me, like actually doing a lot of this stuff. So that's a long-winded way of saying I like the game and it's growing on me. And I'm excited to play more.
Summer, have you had a chance to play?
Barely. Sorry, guys. I was at a festival this weekend doing other gamer shit. So I'm excited to hear what I'll have to say.
Right on. Well, I have played, I don't know, not a ton either because of the busy weekend, but enough to feel like I can talk intelligently about it. I've been playing it with my son, so we've been trading off playing it. And I think it's a really funny game to play with somebody else because we both get really frustrated with the other person when they have the controller. Because to your point, David, their controls are a little bit weird, and the game is asking you to think about, like Emma said, familiar things in a different way. And so, like, I'll watch him fumble with the controls, or get damaged because you're not doing go to sword fighter mode or whatever, and I'm yelling, and then I'll play for a while, and he'll be the same way, and I'm fumbling, and it's like, okay, we should both be a little more patient with each other because. But I'm really loving it too. It's actually, I love how cute it is. I love this art style. And like, obviously we had it in Link's Awakening, but there's just so much more in this game. Like there's more enemies, more characters, more things. And I just love seeing them. And then I think it really is an interesting mix of the top-down 2D Zelda with this more recent sort of 3D creativity and ability to change things and stuff like that. The way those two things interact is kind of interesting in and of itself.
It's interesting, and it mostly works, and then sometimes very clearly doesn't. I feel, you know what I mean? Like it very clearly is like, okay, they're just doing Breath of the Wild to do Breath of the Wild, and then sometimes it's like, oh wow, this actually like fits really well in this format, right? It's an interesting, like you said, it's a very interesting blend.
Yeah, I think to kind of piggyback off that, one really important aspect of it is you aren't a swordsman. You are not Link, and we've been trained for game and game and game to go hit a thing with my sword. And you can't do that. They specifically you have sword fighter mode, but it's limited, and you really are encouraged to do things a totally different way. And for every person, that's going to be different too, because you have 100 or whatever echoes there are. I don't actually know how many there are total. But I looked up a guide at some point because I was curious just to see, how did someone else solve this puzzle?
Yeah.
I solved it this way, but that didn't seem intuitive. But then the guide, I was like, oh, I wouldn't have done it that way anyway.
I don't even know how you would write a guide for this game, to be honest. You could show where things are on a map,
or
but
here's
it's like
one solution.
Yeah. It's just like it's kind of like an unwalk-throughable game, weirdly.
Yeah. But it is very interesting. I found myself getting in a rut sometimes because this one echo that I've used for a whole dungeon before has gotten me so far. And then turns out there's 5 other echoes that I haven't been using that would work here too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think when I play, I definitely want to mix it up. But then I also really just love dropping spike. Or I guess they're urchins.
The urchins.
I just love dropping urchins on people.
That's your melee, right? That's what I do as well. I just spam urchins.
I never use those.
And you can also pick them up with the other big ability, the move ability. So you can just run through, especially weak enemies. You can just have it run you. Which is also, despite the fact that the Echo's ability is a major ability, I think the move ability is kind of equal. I don't know what is it called. I can't think of the name of it. I should have
bind or something.
Yeah, and then you can switch between following or moving a thing, right? And there are some interesting things you can do with that. Shout out to Cool Uncle Vince who mentioned the bird and meat. My son and I have been doing that, but we were also doing other things that are weird.
That's a really good thing to bring up because one of the first times I got stuck in the game, I was trying to use echoes when really I should have been using that ability.
Yeah. I constantly forget that I can do it, and I'm just trying to brute force. I'm just trying to how many trees can I stack in order to jump up? What's the half thing? And I'm like, oh no, I got to use the other parts of my brain, right?
You can pick up enemies and just drop them off the side of the map too.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I do a lot of, you know what I mean? And sometimes I'll be like, dang it, this enemy's, oh wait, hold on, just grab them and drop them in the hole.
Yep.
You know, like, which is funny too, because it's weird because it does mess with your brain. You start kind of getting in a rut, like you said, Emma, and then you realize, there's other ways. And that's why I think the difficulty of this game is interesting. And I don't want to jump ahead to this necessarily, but just this discussion, like, there have been a few puzzles where I've come up to and I've just been like, I don't see it. And then I kind of found a way to do it because I'm like, well, I think if I do this and then do that, it'll work. And then I'll be like, that cannot have been what, to the extent there was an intended strategy. You know, that was not it, because that was really weird and took me 10 tries or whatever.
Hey, but if it worked.
Yeah.
It is scratching that part of my brain where I'm like, I feel like this could work. And then you just like brute force it until it fucking does. You know what I mean? And you're like, and it's clearly not what's intended. And in fact, it's probably how a caveman would do what I'm doing, right? But if you try enough times and then it eventually works, then who's really the genius at the end of the day? It's me, right?
Yeah.
But to your point that you said earlier, Patrick, like about your son watching you and getting frustrated and vice versa. Yeah. I felt very self-conscious streaming this game. You know, I was like, I feel like I'm doing it all wrong. I feel like people are judging me. You know, I feel like I look stupid right now, like in the way that I'm doing it. I'm missing obvious stuff because I'm addicted to using the bed for everything. You know?
Absolutely.
Like, it's very, very strange feeling playing this game.
You know, you do have the ability to go into that sword fighter mode, and sometimes I forget about that because that sometimes is the cleanest way to do stuff. But like, you do run out of it, and then you'll be in a battle or something, and you'll just be like, "What do I do?" You know, and you're running because sometimes enemies are fast or whatever. And I feel dumb sometimes. It's interesting.
Very, very important thing, especially just as a tip, if you're starting off and having trouble with energy, make smoothies. You can make energy smoothies.
For your sword fighter energy.
Yeah. So you can actually refill that bar with stuff from your pockets.
That makes sense.
And then I feel like the time I use it the most is in temples and mini boss and boss fights. And those fights especially are dropping energy for you.
Yeah, that's true. Like when you really need it, they drop it, which is nice. But I have a bone to pick with smoothies. And I know this is a very scattershot. We're not really going like category by category here. But like,
that's fine.
I have a bone to fucking pick with smoothies. And it's like, why are we stuck back in the days of it? Just, if I want to make one smoothie, it takes like 15 seconds, bro.
Oh, yeah.
I like never want to make smoothies because you can't like batch make smoothies. Like I've got so many things to make smoothies with, and I want to make like 7 smoothies at once. I end up barely ever making them because they take so long. You have to go to a place in order to make them. And you can't just make them on the go, right? Like you have to
go to a smoothie shop.
Yeah, fuck that. And it's just like, I don't know. It's just like, man, we've gotten past this. You know, it's been a long time since Animal Crossing for the Switch, right? Like, can't we like finally like batch create things? You know, like, I don't know. It's very frustrating to me.
I thought this was going to be a diet culture rant. I'm so, like when you were getting ready to say like smoothies, I thought we were getting past this. Do we not do other kinds of cooking in this game? Is it just smoothies?
I think it's just smoothies. Yeah.
Just smoothies.
Just Herbalife, huh? Okay.
Zelda's a Jamba Juice girly. Okay. We got to come to terms with it.
One thing I really do like is that the traditional, you have 4 bottles and you can choose to fill them with potion or a fairy. Now you can have your 4 bottles. You can still fill them with potions or a fairy, but there's also smoothies. So, and there's the bed. You really do not need smoothies for filling hearts. The biggest thing is like those extra abilities that you can get from them.
And the fairies hop into the bottles now.
Yeah.
Oh, that is nice. You have
We're
to
no
swing
longer
it rapidly.
hurting them.
Yeah.
They're not sad.
They
and
want to
crying.
go into the bottle. It's their new home.
Wait, okay, so when you sleep in the bed, you gain HP?
Yeah, you do.
So here's an annoying.
I thought it was just a cute thing you could do.
No,
I was laying in beds sometimes in boss fights. Like, get in the bed.
There are better beds. Literally, don't sleep on the bed in that metaphorical sense. Use the bed. The bed is great. Sleep on the bed.
What's
Don't
annoying to me?
Sleep on the bed.
What's annoying to me about the bed and sleeping on it to recover hearts is that you can sleep on it and just set the controller down and your hearts will come back. But if you hop up and get back down and hop up and get back down, they come back faster. And
Really?
Yes.
Micro
And
napping.
so like that's what we do, but I just like, come on, Nintendo, just design it so that if I laid down it was just as fast, because this feels really stupid.
They're
So
gonna
there
catch it in
are-
a week.
There are ways later to make your hearts feel faster in beds.
Yeah, like
there
one
are
of
better
the-
beds.
The badges, or yeah, I've got the soft bed, and I assume there are going to be more, but yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Anyway, maybe we should be a little more systematic about this, but maybe not. This is our scattershot review here.
I mean, that is this game, though. You can skip
Yeah.
things. The first time I was able to, I was going through the world and was like, oh, I go this way because the path and the tile traditionally tells me to go this way. But then I realized you can just climb on the trees and boundaries don't matter. And they let you do things in any order. It really does open things up to creativity, but there's no walls. And that
Mhm.
can be kind of scary and daunting, but it's so cool also.
Yeah, agreed. I think we were talking about this on the Discord where it's clearly intended, right? They kind of almost, I feel like, early on point you towards
Yeah.
quote unquote cheating and going to a new area. I think with the Zora domain, or the whatever it's called, in Zora, the Jabba
Mhm.
waters, being right next to the Deku scrub, and you just kind of come up to this wall and you're like,
Yep.
wait, is there a way over this wall? And that's what happened to us. And then now we're down in the Deku scrub area, and these enemies are a
Yep.
little tougher, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so I think the game does purposefully kind of guide you to break it. And
It totally does.
and it's really kind of cool, but it also still feels like you're cheating. It's an interesting feeling.
Yeah, that to me feels very similar to Breath of the Wild at first,
Exactly.
Yes.
where you realize I could just go climb this mountain. Oh shit, I shouldn't have climbed this mountain. There's really terrifying things up here, but I can get there.
Yeah.
And for like a 2D, traditionally, right? Like 2D Zelda games are very linear and gated and stuff. And so this feels, if it's kind of a cool breaking of that pattern.
Kind of, though, because I don't know that that's necessarily true, and I have not played enough of this game to
No.
really say definitively. But I mean, let's look back at the most recent top-down 2D Zelda games. The two most recent top-down 2D Zelda games are Triforce Heroes, which is, I don't know if that game was linear, but it's certainly breaking of Zelda tradition, right? And then Link Between the Worlds, which was an open world.
Yeah.
You could play it in any order that you wanted, And I think that people have been kind of a bit yearning for that general Zelda progression. I noticed this when I was playing the Gerudo area. There were a lot of like jumps that I could only barely make, or that were like difficult to get through, or I could only spawn enough stuff to where I could blah, 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 blah. But if I had played that one second instead of first, that would have been a lot easier. You know what I mean? And there's probably stuff in the Zora area that's the same, or the vice versa.
No,
right?
I think the Zora is meant to be first. I could be wrong.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Yeah.
Do
I
you
did
disagree,
Gerudo and-
Emma?
No,
Oh, okay.
I was kind of wondering how that felt the other way. I felt fine with the Gerudo area, and then I did feel like the Zora area was a little easier, but I couldn't tell if that's because now I have these more powerful echoes.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, it's like you don't really we're not really back to that progression of like, I go into a temple, and in this temple there is a new item, and now for the rest of that game I have this item. You know what I mean? It is emulating the Breath of the Wildification of the Zelda franchise, in that the progression is still not kind of back to where it used to be,
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know how I feel about that necessarily. Like, especially if like, Aonuma has talked about how like 3D Zeldas and 2D Zeldas are like two separate franchises, right? It doesn't really feel like that. This just kind of feels like the blending of the two, which again, is not a bad thing at all. I'm not like, this isn't a knock against the game. I'm just like curious as to like, is just every Zelda game like this from now on? Like, is that like the world we're in, where they're all just kind of like open worlds? Like, I don't know. It's just a little strange, and maybe I'm off base, and actually like to hear your thoughts on that, Emma, since you are a lot further than I am.
I think there is some progression to it, and some of it is tied into that sense of like the creativity aspect and how that makes it difficult. For instance, those first two areas you can do in either direction, but one is underwater based. So if you're using all these fish echoes you got, they're not really going to do much for you in the Gerudo area. And that fancy like I don't know, maybe you got something in the Gerudo area that's just going to drown in the water.
That's a good point.
So they do make them in a way where you're not necessarily leveling up, so to speak, going from one to the other. They are kind of on par with each other. But then you kind of pass that story check mark. And after that, there is kind of progression of, oh, okay, now I'm getting more powerful echoes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But also, you can get a powerful echo and then forget about it, and it sits in your thing, and you don't realize you have that anyway. You're still throwing beds at it.
Yeah, we got the UI from Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild very much, and we definitely have the like in Tears of the Kingdom when you can merge something on your arrow, which I can't remember what that's called, and you have that gigantic horizontal list of things. We have that here too, and it's like, man, this is a terrible way. And I guess you can sort it, but like.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think if there is like one thing, well, I think there's probably two things that you can really complain about that I've heard are like the main complaints with this game and that I agree with. And one is performance, which I think we should talk about later, but one is the fundamental aspect of this gameplay. Like the thing that is this gameplay is tacked with this incredibly cumbersome menu system in order to use it. And I was playing this game in front of somebody and on Twitch, and they were like, man, you sure are going into menus a lot in this game. And I was like, yeah, man, I feel like half the time I'm in a fucking menu trying to find what it is that I need for this moment. And I just think that is just an awful way to do it, right? I think like, I don't know necessarily the best way that they could have done as an alternative. I think some people online have shown like radial menus, and some people have shown different rows that you can pick from or whatever, or different categories. And maybe that would be a little bit better. But it does seem like one big long row with like hundreds of fucking items when you're just trying to find one does not seem like the best way to do it, right?
Yeah. The best idea I've heard is have that awful menu or some form of it, because there's just too many. Even if you can sort it, you're still going to have that problem if there's just too many. But allow people to set hotkeys for like 4.
Mm-hmm.
Like if bed was on an easily accessible hotkey and the crate, and if you want this particular moblin you use all the time, set that one. I think that would be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I have gotten in the better habit of sorting, because I do think that is a key thing for it. Like sorting by most recently used, sorting by most recently gained and stuff. But it's cumbersome. I think the buttons are just cumbersome too. I think Tears of the Kingdom had the same problem, where I'm pushing up on the D-pad by accident. Wait, I meant to push right. I don't know why. There's just something weird about
I know why.
Keys.
It's because Tears of the Kingdom, you have to press up to get to one of those menus. Your brain is trained to do that.
That's true. I keep accidentally going into sword fighter mode, but I'm trying to just pull up an item, pull up an echo.
I realized it's because Tears of the Kingdom, you do press up for certain things.
And it's got the same UI and menus and stuff. So that's probably part of it. But I am getting better at it.
If that's confusing you, you can also use the right bump or the left bumper to press that left D-pad or right D-pad button.
Yeah, but then that calls into question why wasn't what you've got extra buttons that are doing the same thing. Like, give me like a fucking hotkey that I can. I don't know. It's just silly. I don't know. I'm also spoiled by the Steam Deck. Like, part of me like really wants to just like play this game, like emulate it on Steam Deck instead, because I'm sure that there are going to be mods that like fix the performance issues or that fix a lot of the stuff like on when you emulate the game, and apparently it runs great on the Steam Deck, right? So, sorry, Nintendo, don't take down our fucking episode. But yeah, I don't know. It's just frustrating. I'm so used to the kind of granularity and modularity of a platform like that going back to the Switch and doing stuff on a system where it's all kind of locked and you can only play how they want you to play feels a little stifling.
Well, we've talked a lot about the various gameplay parts. One of the things we haven't talked a lot about is the whole still world versus the regular world versus temples in overworld versus, temples in the still world, or I don't know how it all works exactly, but there's this sort of different gameplay, right? A little bit when you're in the still world that kind of requires more echoes and stuff to kind of move around and solve some of the weird location puzzles and all that. Are y'all enjoying that dynamic of going back and forth or the actual like dungeons and that sort of thing?
I like it because to me, anything in the still world is itself a dungeon or a mini dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good way to kind of let you have little chunks of dungeon that's literally just a hole in the ground that, I need to go into. And it kind of puts me in, okay, I'm not in exploration side quest mode. Now I am solving this puzzle. I am now in a puzzle.
That's true. The areas feel more linear, and it's less like, hey, you can go anywhere and do anything. And it's more like, okay, we've designed this area to be beaten this way.
Yeah, this is a puzzle.
And that is a nice change of pace as I'm playing a game that is as open and open-ended as this game is, right? I've been enjoying the dungeons. I haven't played too many, but what I have done so far have felt really good to me. And I've been enjoying that quite a bit. Yeah, I don't know. It's cool. And it's also nice, you could just jump in this game. There's no like Rock's Feather required. You just have the ability to jump from the very beginning, which is great, obviously in traversal in the open world. But then when you're in the still world, all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, now this is kind of like a platformer, And then, it's when you're in dungeons, obviously too, is when you're really doing a lot of the kind of side-scrolling platforming stuff. And all that stuff feels great with the jump button. I really do hope that's one thing from Tears of the Kingdom I hope stays for top-down Zelda is just the ability to jump at all times. I think is a really great addition to this game.
I think there's so much emphasis on traversal and doing it however you want it. The jumping's the easy part. You're just going to jump into a chasm, though, if you don't, plan out your beds and plan these platforms you're building. And is your monster just going to jump in a chasm? Half the time, yes. But you mentioned that kind of difference between normal exploration and platform. And it's worth saying that as a 2D Zelda, there are actually 2D portions in dungeons and things.
Oh, yeah. We haven't mentioned that.
Yeah, you might go into a cave and then you do that thing where you go down a ladder and now you are actually in 2D mode, which I think is fun because there are some echoes that work better or worse between the two different versions. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really fun to kind of play around with that.
Yeah, you're right. It is fun to get into a 2D section with a new couple of things and realize how they're more useful here or less useful here or whatever.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the guys the Roombas that go back and forth in 2D are super helpful because you're just like tap, 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 and throw them out. Yeah.
And there's definitely enemies that work differently, but there's also the water block and other things you can use that in the water 2D versions, you're basically making your own platform. The water stuff is really fun and interesting. There's so much to do in the water zones.
Also, you mentioned falling off, or your things falling off. This game's pretty forgiving with its save and with its, you don't lose hearts for falling off. Now, I know there are difficulty modes and I'm playing on normal. And if you didn't know, there is a hard mode.
There's a hero mode.
Yeah. And so maybe you take damage if you fall off of a platform in hero mode. I don't know. But it feels right with how much it's possible to fall off in this game, and with how with where they put you back. There's been a few times where we've died and I've been like, oh man, and then it's like, oh no, we're just right back at that room. And that feels really modern for Nintendo.
And the temples each have multiple warp points inside them. They're very forgiving. They want you to try things and fail because most of the things you try aren't going to work on the first time anyway.
I was going to move us along to talking maybe sort of about art and music, because I feel like this game has the same art style as the Link's Awakening remake, which is kind of this toyetic, looks like clay toy figure kind of thing. It's really working for me. I don't know about y'all. Again, in Link's Awakening, there were only 3 or 4 human or Hylians, or I don't even know what they're called in that game, but there's so many more. I just love the character designs and the enemy designs in this game. How are y'all feeling? Is it too cutesy or are you liking it?
I really like it. The too cutesy is something that I think is worth addressing, especially as a game where you can play as a girl and they know they're going to get comments on, oh, this is a girly version. But no, it's cutesy in a way that is really endearing, but also just makes me smile and happy to actually be in this world.
Yes.
It's cutesy in the same way that Link's Awakening was cutesy. You know what I mean? So it definitely doesn't feel like a gendered thing to me. It's working for me, I think, for the most part. I think every once in a while I get kind of annoyed by it. When you're in the Gerudo Desert, there's just a wind effect that's just over everything that doesn't like move with the camera. It's just like in front of everything. And I'm like, this kind of looks a little cheap, and I think a lot of people really did not like the tilt shift blurring on the edges. And that is back with a vengeance in this. As soon as you jump up onto a tree, you can't see anything on the ground. It's all like blurred out. The depth of field gets really hard to see all of a sudden. So basically everything that people had complaints about with Link's Awakening is like even more so in this game, right?
Yeah.
So I think that know that going into it, if that was a problem for you, right? But also all of the things that I loved about the Link's Awakening aesthetic and the graphic design are all here and even more, right? So like you said, I think the character designs are great, Patrick. I love seeing the kind of blending of Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom style character designs into this art style, because like a lot of the Gerudo look exactly like this. And the Zoras, there's like the old school Link to the Past Zoras and like the Ocarina of Time Zoras, and so it's cool seeing them kind of being able to pick from whatever they want throughout the entire Zelda canon is really cool.
Absolutely. I think it's also worth mentioning that Zelda's had this problem a lot of people saying like art design style too cutesy, too not cutesy. Like when Wind Waker came out, people were like, oh, it's too cutesy. What's the cell shading? And then they went the other direction and made it too dark. And then they went the other direction.
Yeah, fair point.
I do like that Zelda doesn't have like one lockdown style. I like that you can make a Zelda game in any number of styles, and they've almost all been different, which is so cool. Like what other franchises like that, right?
Yeah, but you're right. Those little elements where they get to pick from so many different games. There's so much that screams nostalgia, even though it's in a different art style, even though it is slightly different. It's so similar at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the music in this game a lot. I think it's jumping out at me a lot as giving vibes of different Nintendo games sometimes, like the horn that the Zora guy plays has a little Animal Crossing feel to it. Some of the creepy music makes me think about Luigi's Mansion. I think the music's a little like understated sometimes in ways that I enjoy. I don't know. I've been really on board with the music in this game, but it's not, I don't know. Do y'all feel the same way? It's maybe it's a little different. In some ways than I might have expected it to be.
I like it. I think a lot of it is a little repetitive to me, to be honest. I'm not as big a fan of the music in this game as I was hoping. I think the arrangement is incredible, and it sounds like they used real instruments, and they have clearly, it's presented really, really well, and it's really well recorded and all that. But I think that it's kind of missing a little bit of the zhuzh that the Link's Awakening soundtrack had. I mean, Link's Awakening soundtrack is legendary. I think there's some really incredible melodies in that soundtrack. And then when you played it with this band style that they did in that remake, it was just gorgeous, right? And I think there's not enough there with the actual composition of the music here. But that said, there are a couple that were big standouts. I mean, when you're in the still world, that is like an arresting number that plays, and it's like it really kind of zones you out,
I was going to mention that the still world especially has really jumped out to me music-wise. Mm-hmm. And it does, there's a shift, when you go into that and you're in a different place. It has this different art style in the music, but it's really good.
It's very somber. It's like melancholy in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very strange, but yeah, I don't know. Again, not very far. I definitely am looking forward to hearing a lot more of the soundtrack, and just the way that it's all recorded is just really beautiful.
Yeah. It's definitely not like this is a song. You know what I mean? As much as it is like this is a mood or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the reason that I'm like kind of annoyed by the music is because I keep putting it down and forgetting that it's playing. And then I realize, I've been listening to this like 1 minute loop of the song for like 35 minutes on my TV while I've been doing something else. And God damn it, I'm going crazy.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, there's a few more things we should hit here, and one of which is the story. Most Zelda games are Link saving Zelda. This one is a little bit inverted, but there's also the sort of, I thought we might want to talk about the sort of the opening and then the companion character and how we're feeling about the story of it. Anybody have any thoughts about the story elements of this?
The opening made me so happy because they do that tease where they give you all the powers. You start out how spoilery do we want to be about the first 5 minutes of the game?
I think we can spoil the first.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you start out as Link going into this random dungeon. You have all your stuff. And it's really nostalgic because it feels very like A Link to the Past. And even the like little fight they make you do is directly boss mechanics from a previous boss.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is A Link to the Past's boss. And it really makes you think like, oh, this is everything I know Link and Zelda to be. But then within those first 5 minutes, they're like, nope, too bad. You don't get to play that way. You are not that.
I think that was maybe a sticking point for me too, though. It was like a little frustrating, like playing as Link and having all this like ability. And I was like, oh man, it feels so good to shoot my arrow and it feels so good to hit my, and then they're like, nope, you can't do that ever again. And I was like,
well,
no.
I mean, that's not true. I'll say.
Yeah. Sure. Yes. But I mean, it was immediately taken from me and I felt like a child who had his ice cream taken.
Yeah. But I do kind of like that shift because they make it very clear you're not going to be solving problems the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't expect to go up and slash something with your sword. Sorry, we took it away. But now you have this new ability and it's all you've got.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that Zelda can still spin, though. That's good.
The spin is awesome, and
Very
it's
cute.
the fastest movement option, so I spin everywhere.
But story-wise, to kind of go back to your question thread there, I think that's a really good way to start it, of Link saving Zelda, and then you're Zelda, but something's happened to Link. And you don't really know who Link is, but you are Zelda, Princess of Hyrule, so how are you going to deal with this?
Mm. It is like the most basic way they could make a game starring Zelda.
Yeah.
You know, it's like one time Link was saving Zelda and then Link got taken away and now it's only Zelda. And it was like, fuck it. I could have written that in 5th grade.
Yeah.
Shout out to my 5th grade fan fiction. Yeah.
But I mean, I do think the story kind of after that is nice of you're not just some nameless swordsman. You are Princess Zelda. Mm-hmm. You know, people in town know you. You actually have to deal with the repercussions of everything going on. The king is your dad.
But then you step outside of it and nobody knows you, but they know who Link is.
Well, it's because you're wearing a hood. It's like Clark Kent's glasses.
It is like
you know?
Clark Kent's glasses.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, is that Zelda?
A few people do end up knowing you. And spoiler alert, you don't have to be hidden in a hood the whole time.
Yeah. I'm kind of looking forward to that part. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to wear the hood anymore. I'm over the hood.
There's multiple clothes options.
Good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, before we move on from story really quickly, this ties into gameplay a little bit, but there are a lot of side quests. Are y'all doing which feel kind of, again, out of Breath of the Wild or something, where it's like, I want an apple from that tree or something. I've been enjoying them, but I could see myself getting tired of them too. I'm not sure. Are y'all doing side quests, Emma, David?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've been doing them all because I'm a completionist, but also because I've been rushing through this game. And part of me always wants more. Like you get that feeling of like, oh no, I don't want to finish it. I don't want to quite put it down. So it's been nice to be like, okay, I finished a dungeon. I'm not going to go straight to the next one. I'm going to potter around in this town for a little while.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about difficulty. There are the 2 modes. And then there are, I think I said, there have been some puzzles where it's thrown me, or a little small boss where it's taken me some time. At first, I felt like the game was maybe too easy, but I think I'm changing my perspective on that. I don't know where y'all are landing on difficulty. Is it just right? Too easy?
I think it's as easy as every other Zelda game. It's not like Zelda is known for its intense difficulty. It does feel like there will be... Oh, I'll be happy if this game, by the end of it, bucks a little bit of the inverse difficulty spike that Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild had. Like if they can keep making it harder as I'm getting more and more abilities, I'll be happy. You know what I mean? Because I feel like in those games, in Breath of the Wild, it's like really hard at the beginning because you don't have jack shit. And then by the end, you're super powerful. And because you can play the game in any order, everybody's just like a pissant to you by the end of that game. You can just take them all out, right? So I feel like this game is at least a little bit more linear than that. So I'll be happy if that's the case by the end of the game here.
What I will say about difficulty is that I agree with David. It's not any harder than any other Zelda game, but the difficulty is in a different vein. because the problems are different. It rewards creativity and wisdom. And if you're smart, it's not hard at all. But if you're not being smart, that thing, it might kill you. But like with a lot of the monsters, my default is, I'm going to throw my level 3 sword moblin at it. And it's probably going to die. However, this is a platform puzzle, and that's not going to work.
Yeah.
A lot of the difficulty comes in making me rethink about things. And I think the puzzle aspect is really satisfying in this game.
Yes.
Because you feel really good when you figure out that you needed that one random echo you never really use. Or there's 5 different ways to do it, but the way you did it worked. Because the difficulty is not in the bosses per se. It's figuring out what the right strategy is.
Yeah. There was an optional boss that was in a little side thing I did. And I think it just took me a long time to kind of figure out how to do it. And I think to the point where I was like, I feel really dumb and bad at this game. But then like, okay, now I understand it. And it's more of a puzzle thing. Yep. And it presented some challenges. But
just drop a bunch of urchins on it.
Yeah, it didn't work.
That doesn't always work.
I know. I just always want to do
it. Well, last up on here, we should mention the performance issues that David kind of mentioned earlier. Can you break that down? This was in Link's Awakening, right? With
again. All of the things that came with Link's Awakening are back, but more intense. And that includes the performance issues, right? Link's Awakening kind of had issues because that was still kind of somewhat screen by screen based, like you would kind of change areas. This is much more open. And so it's like the game is constantly trying to be 60 frames per second. And then most of the time is at 30 frames per second. And I really just wish that they would have just capped it at 30. I think that I'm not super bothered by performance that much, really. But this game, it does annoy me, and it is very noticeable to me. And it's because it's just constantly happening, right? Like when you're in a dungeon, it's a lot better and it's a lot more solid. But whenever you're in the overworld, it's just this kind of constant stuttering back and forth. That's just not a good look, And I think that, visually the game is also beautiful, and it really, like the art direction and design of this game is just incredible. But I just think it's a little throttled by being super crunched on the Switch, right? And it's like, I'm playing this game and I'm like, man, the Switch 2 cannot get here fast enough. It's like, that's another reason I'm like, I kind of want to emulate this on the Steam Deck. It's like, output this at fucking 4K or whatever, It's like, not that my Steam Deck could play it at 4K, but you get what I'm saying. It's like, I think this on the next gen system would really be completely gobsmacking. I think this would be a really, really beautiful game. And I've kind of felt that way with a lot of Nintendo games, especially towards the end of this generation.
This past year, yeah.
Yeah, for this past year, exactly. Princess Peach Showtime, was clearly made for the Switch 2. You know what I mean? And then they only released the last gen version to us, and they're like, this is it, this is the game, And so I just really think that thing really needs to come out, and I really hope that there's just kind of a blanket games just run better on the new system with the new Switch, because I think $10. We'll see if I do that, but it's like I don't know. Either way, I'm a little disappointed in that. It's not going to stop me from continuing to play this game, but it just really feels like these games were developed with better hardware in mind. We're kind of being forced to play them on this 8-year-old tablet.
I mean, I definitely have noticed the performance problems. I am not super bothered by performance things. I recognize that it's happening, but also it's cute and I'm going to play it anyway. Sure. Would it be better on a Switch 2? Absolutely. You're right. I could definitely see some stuttering and the visual effects, especially because it's trying to not load areas, but load them at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just it's just Nintendo it's so un-Nintendo. All the releases from this past year having major performance problems because it's like look at like Mario Odyssey. Like that game is like butter, dude. Like it just like works, it just never has a single drop. And you're like, this is the Nintendo I know. Like, it's just frustrating to see us in this transition period right now where it's just so obvious that the successor to the Nintendo Switch was meant to be out last year.
I mean, take Tears of the Kingdom, for example. They had something in the coding that they would start loading the underworld when you were near a zone to drop into it. So they had seamless loading. But if you drop from too high, the game didn't know to do that, and you got stutters.
Yeah, exactly.
But like they try. They do a lot with what they have with the system. But things like this, you're right. They should have just capped it at 30.
I think so. Yeah, just take the L.
Yeah, because sometimes it'll drop like lower than that because it's trying. And I think they could have just said like, nah, let's just have it a consistent 30. You wouldn't notice the change as much. Sure, it's lower, but.
Nobody would have complained either. I think everybody would have been happy with it.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should close out the conversation. Are there any other final thoughts about the game that we want to make sure and get in before we wrap it up?
I'm just so happy with it all. I mean, I want to talk more about the story and stuff when people have played more of it, because I'm aware that I kind of have binged it. So if people want to talk more about it, come get on the Discord or I love seeing how people are solving things. But it's so, so satisfying to finally play as Zelda.
Yes, that's true.
It really is. As a lifelong Zelda fan who's always playing Link, I'm so happy.
Yeah, they really do. They brought it home in that regard, and it is a worthy game for Zelda, where it's like Princess Peach Showtime. I feel like it's a little debatable on if that's like really like, oh, we could finally play as Peach. And it's like, but is you're playing like a play. This is like Zelda like being a fucking badass and like murdering people, like it's very fun.
And it's nostalgic. It wants the people that remember Link to the Past that also want to play as Zelda. Like it really isn't saying this is for a different audience. It's just a new, different Zelda game.
Yeah.
Grezzo.
Oh yeah.
Let's go.
Wonderful.
Good job, Grezzo. I mean,
good job, Grezzo.
Obviously Link's Awakening and Miitopia, and Grezzo has been doing stuff with Nintendo for a very long time, and they've been doing good work with Nintendo for a long time. But this really feels like the first time that they've been like, go, have fun, make a game, And if this is their, hey, this is what we can do, then hell yeah. Let the leash off of Grezzo. Let them keep making new stuff. Let them play in the play box, in the sandbox, or the toy box, right, of this. And I think I'm just really, really impressed with what they were able to do. And I think more than anything, I think that there is some stuff that probably like a little more oversight or a little bit more hand-holding from Aonuma or whoever the kind of heads at Nintendo are, probably could have helped make this into a tighter package. But what I love that I've seen from Grezzo from this game is just playing with the fucking formula, trying something very new. Like I have really never we keep talking about how nostalgic this game is, but in so many ways, this game feels very, very fresh, right? Yes. And in a lot of ways, especially after I've been playing a game like UFO 50, which is just giving you new ideas that you've never seen before in like an old form factor, this game kind of feels like that, right? Like it's really just refreshing to play something that's completely new and unique and original. And so, big applause for that.
I definitely agree with you and want to piggyback on that I have mentioned the nostalgia a ton, but it's what's new and what breaks that formula that it's similar to the Echoes, where you realize, oh, I have to kind of rethink about this. And they're doing super well. The dungeons themselves, I think the way they've played with that puzzle element is super good.
Yeah, and I'm learning the names of so many Zelda enemies.
That's true.
That I never knew. I was like, oh, that's called a bleep blop. Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay, this is hilarious to me because I'm one of those people that already knew all of these names.
Oh, of course. No, I think that's a thing that's happening.
So many of my friends have been saying the same thing, and it's so funny.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for our discussion on The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. If you're out there playing it and you have any comments to share with your experience, we'd love to hear them. And with that, we're going to take another short break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the games we've been playing. I have been really just playing The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. And then I put that truck came and I played a tiny bit of Smash and some other things on that game truck at that party with my kid and kids at the party. But otherwise, I've been playing a little bit of MEO, the Smiling Man Famicom Detective Club. Not a ton. I just haven't had a lot of extra time. So I haven't played that many games, but maybe next time. We'll see.
What chapter are you on MEO?
Oh, that's a good question. 8-ish, give or take.
Okay. There's like 10,
around
right?
that. I don't know.
Yeah. Getting pretty far.
Yeah. Really enjoying it, but yeah, that's all I got.
Great. Yeah, I'll go next. So other than Echoes of Wisdom, the game I've really been playing has been, I can't stop talking about it. I've been talking about this entire episode, is UFO 50. And in lieu of just, I talked about the game last week. And for those that didn't hear last week, it is a game that released with 50 games. And it's basically all different NES style games that never really existed back in the day. But instead of just talking about the game in totality, I wanted to talk about 3 individual ones that kind of had a difference of gameplay here. The first one I want to talk about is Campanella. And Campanella is kind of a game that reminds me a little bit of like Super Monkey Ball or Marble Madness or something like that. But it is a kind of side-scrolling, like a 2D side-on game where you play as a little UFO, kind of like how you would like a lunar lander game, or you would press A to like thrust upward, but the controls just feel so tight and good in this, right? And as you're going through the game, you're just trying not to hit the walls, because if you touch a wall, you die in one hit, or if you get hit by an enemy, you die in one hit, right? But you're also, every time you chop an enemy, you get a little bit more fuel for your ship. And you also get points that can then lead to like extra lives, right? So there's a lot of games in UFO 50 that like have this like fuel management system, right? So it's kind of this risk reward of going for things and trying to get there fast, or getting as many points as you can, but then maybe running out of fuel. And I found Campanella to be one of the most fun games in the pack. And it's also the first of 3 Campanella games in UFO 50, right? Like, so within UFO 50, there are like sequels to games from earlier in the thing. So it's like Campanella released quote unquote in 1984, and then Campanella 2 released in 1987, and it's a roguelike. And then Campanella 3 is 3D because it released in 1989, and it's like a Star Fox style game, right? So it's cool to see kind of it echo throughout. You see characters from that game in different games and stuff like that as well. Another game I've been really enjoying from UFO 50 is Party House. And this is kind of the deck builder game of UFO 50. And it's basically a game, it's like a Rolodex simulator. And it's basically, you're trying to throw a party at your house. And so you've got a Rolodex of people that you know and can invite. And then basically there are some characters that you can invite that are like alcoholics, or they're like called trouble, which have like X's on them. And so if you have 3 people that are trouble, then the cops come and your party is busted, right? So it's kind of, but then you can buy more people to invite to your party through your Rolodex, right? So you spend popularity points to buy people, but you want to buy enough people that offset the trouble, or it's kind of a little bit like a blackjack deck builder, because you don't ever want to go over. So like if you have 2 trouble, then you could push further and maybe get some more popularity. But then I might get busted by the cops or whatever, right? So it's a very, very fun game. I'm really, really enjoying that one. That honestly, Party House might be worth buying UFO 50 alone just for that game. It's incredibly fun. It has an endless mode as well once you clear the like 5 decks that they give you. And then lastly, I want to talk about a game that I've been completely obsessed with in UFO 50 called Pilot Quest. And this is kind of the idle game that is in UFO 50. It made use of the LX3's internal clock, the system from the 1980s that never really came out. But basically, it's a game where you're kind of you have these resources and you're building them over time, and you have these helpers that can then accrue you resources. So as long as you're playing UFO 50, this game is kind of in the background making more resources for you. And basically you're playing the pilot from Campanella, and you've crashed your UFO like on the planet. And then part of what you can also do is you can go out, and it's basically got a little top-down Zelda game built into it, right? So whenever you go out and you go to gather more resources, it's like a Zelda-like, and it's got an overworld, and there's enemies that you can fight with your yo-yo, and you can do dungeons and temples, but there's a time limit, right? And you can increase that time limit with more resources, right? But you have to go out, gather as much as you can, and then make your way back to the entrance before time runs out. And every time you get hit, it takes time away from you. So it's just really interesting mechanics. And this is just like, again, a taste of the 50 games that are in this collection for $25. I'll have you guys know. But these are 3 standouts. Maybe next week I'll talk about 3 more that I've been enjoying because I don't see myself stopping playing this game anytime soon. Summer, what about you? What have you been playing?
I mean, aside from the regular, like I mentioned, I'm back on Yakuza and I'm still playing Fire Emblem, but I, got on my Xbox and I was like, what's like a small game that I could, or not small, but like not a crazy long game, because I was just like in the mood for something new. So I finally booted up Thirsty Suitors, which I think came out last year or the early this year. I don't know if it was this year or last year.
I think it was last year.
Okay. Wow, this game is funny. It's really, the writing is really good. And the gameplay itself is also very good. So it's very balanced and it's a perfect game for me. The cast is honestly hilarious. Thirsty Suitors, basically, it's about this girl who has this nasty breakup, decides to go back home. And it's basically like, it's Scott Pilgrim, but for like American Indians, I guess, or not, Indians who have moved to America, not
Indian Americans.
Yes. Yeah. And it's awesome. I love it. It's so funny. Like all of her funny exes, but it's about like you fight the exes, but then like make amends with them, and like how you can like restore that relationship and how it's still like worth restoring those relationships. And it's all about relationships. I love it. It's fun.
Sounds
That's awesome.
good.
Yeah, it looks really cool. I love the graphical style too.
Oh my gosh, I adore it. It's just fun to look at. It's really fun to look at. And the main gameplay, besides like the turn-based battle, is skateboarding. So if you like skateboarding and video games, that part is pretty good too. Because it's like score attack kind of stuff. Yeah.
What about you, Emma? Have you been playing anything other than Echoes of Wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, definitely binged Echoes, especially once I realized y'all wanted to talk about it today. But I was probably going to binge it anyway. But other than that, I've been playing a little bit of World of Warcraft with my partner, and that's a time sink. It's one of those things that's endless.
Is it the classic version that you're playing? Or is
No, I'm not playing the classic one. The newest expansion or whatever came out this month. So I tried it out. It's very fun. I'm going to try to not get too addicted.
Good
luck.
Yeah, Godspeed.
Thank you.
Well, then, I think that does it for this episode 277 on The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Thank you so much, Emma, for coming on and talking with us.
Always happy to. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks to MilkyWay.co, who does our website. Thanks to Corduroy, who does our awesome music. Thanks to all of our patrons over on Patreon. If you're looking for me, Patrick, you can find me online as PDYX.
You can find me at Weebwitched.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about you, Emma? Where can people find you online?
I'm Emma on the Discord and increasingly nowhere else.
Hell yeah. Very good. Let's erase that social media footprint, baby.
Yep. Hey.
If you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Twitter, at Super Switch Headz on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We have a website, switchheads.com, and we have a Patreon. Like Patrick said, we also have our Discord and Facebook group. Please go and join our Discord, and please join our Patreon as well. Chuck in $1 if you enjoy the show. We'd really appreciate your patronage there. But all in all, leave us a like, leave us a review on iTunes, give us a subscribe on YouTube. Discord, such a wonderful place to be at all times. It's gotten so many people to buy cattails since we've been talking about it. I'm just seeing everybody buy cattails. I'm like, should I buy cattails? I think probably not.
Just use your coins. It's $2. I know you've got $200.
$2.
All right. Well,
I'll do it for $2.
All right. This was not meant to be an endorsement of cattails. I'm not trying to use my project to endorse any one particular candidate.
I will endorse your Discord, though. I will happily give an endorsement to come chat with me about Zelda on Discord.
There you go. Join us over there. Well, that's going to do it for the episode. Thanks again, Emma. And man, we love Echoes of Wisdom. We're going to be back next week with another banger of an episode, so don't touch that dial. But in the meantime, you guys know the drill. Stay safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Hey, you can finally play as Girl Link.
Hey.
We love you guys very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.